The sun had just set over the quiet suburban neighborhood when Officer Mark Harris heard the sound of a faint knock, too soft to be alarming, yet oddly persistent. He wasn't on duty tonight, he was home, barefoot, helping his daughter with her school project. But when he opened the door, he found no one there, just a crumpled HOA notice pinned to his mailbox. Violation number 37, unauthorized mailbox color. Mark chuckled. He'd painted it the same shade of gray as every other house, but this wasn't about color. It was about control. The new HOA president, Karen Mills, had been sending notices to nearly everyone on the block, but she seemed obsessed with Mark's house in particular. Maybe it was because he'd ignored her first mandatory meeting. Maybe it was because she didn't know what he really did for a living. Mark shrugged it off, unaware this petty power game was about to explode into something shocking. The next morning, his wife found Karen standing in their front yard, measuring their grass with a ruler. Mark walked out calmly, his police instincts kicking in. He could tell this wasn't just about HOA rules. It was personal. And Karen wasn't going to stop. By the time Mark walked back inside, a strange unease crept through him. His daughter whispered, "Daddy, that lady looked through my window last night." Mark froze. If that was true, things were about to get serious. That night, Mark installed a motion sensor camera near the porch. It wasn't because he was paranoid, it was because something about Karen didn't add up. She smiled too much when she complained. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were watching everything. At midnight, the alert went off. Mark checked his phone. There she was, Karen, walking across his lawn in her robe, holding a flashlight. She wasn't just snooping. She was writing things down. Measuring his windows. Taking photos. The next morning, Mark went to her house. "Karen, this is harassment," he said, his voice calm but firm. She crossed her arms. "I'm the HOA president, Mark. I have the right to inspect violations." "Not at midnight, you don't." Her smirk didn't fade. "If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind." Mark knew then this wasn't about HOA power, it was about ego. She'd built a little kingdom, and he'd unknowingly challenged her authority by ignoring her petty notices. When Mark returned home, he found his back gate open. Footprints in the mud led to the back door. His stomach tightened. Karen had crossed the line from petty rules to personal invasion. He quietly began documenting everything: photos, timestamps, video clips. Because deep down, Mark knew this was heading towards something much bigger, and he wasn't going to stop it. He was going to prove it. 3 days later, Mark came home early from his shift. His daughter, Lily, was sitting on the porch, clutching her backpack tightly. "Daddy," she whispered. Miss Karen came inside. Mark's heart skipped. "What do you mean, inside?" "She said she needed to check the thermostat. She used a key." A chill ran through him. He'd changed the locks when they moved in. So how did she have one? He stormed to Karen's house, but her door stayed closed. Her car was in the driveway, but she didn't answer. Later that evening, he noticed something strange: his front door was slightly open. His instincts as a cop kicked in immediately. Quiet steps. Deep breaths. One hand near his concealed holster. Inside, the house looked normal until he heard the faint creak upstairs. He moved silently toward the sound. The moment he turned the corner into his daughter's room, he froze. Karen stood there, rifling through drawers. His police badge was lying on the table. When she turned and saw him, her face went pale. "Karen," he said, his voice low and steady, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Karen stammered, I was just checking for unauthorized storage." "The HOA has the right, inside a child's room?" Mark interrupted sharply. His calm tone carried quiet authority. Her eyes darted to the badge on the table. "Wait. You're a police officer?" Mark nodded slowly. "Detective Harris. And you're trespassing." For a split second, Karen's bravado cracked. But she quickly tried to recover. "You can't arrest me. I'm just doing my duty." Mark took out his phone and showed her the video feed from his hidden cameras, her entering the home, picking up his badge, and walking upstairs. Her lips trembled. You recorded me?" "Everything," he said quietly. And now, Karen. You're going to leave before this gets worse. But she didn't move. Instead, she whispered, "You think you can scare me? The HOA owns this neighborhood." Mark looked her dead in the eye. Not anymore. He walked to the door and called dispatch. "This is Detective Harris. I need a unit at Maplewood Lane. Code 602. For the first time, Karen realized the situation was real. The color drained from her face as the sound of sirens began echoing in the distance. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the white siding of Mark's home. Neighbors peeked through curtains as two officers stepped out of their cruiser. Karen stood frozen, her clipboard trembling in her hand. "Ma'am," one officer said, "you're being detained for trespassing and unlawful entry." Karen's voice cracked. "No. I'm the HOA president." "That doesn't make you above the law," Mark replied quietly. They placed her under temporary detention for questioning. The neighbors began gathering, murmuring in disbelief. The woman who once sent everyone letters about trash cans and lawn heights was now the one in handcuffs. Later that night, Mark sat with his daughter. "Is she going to jail?" "Daddy?" "She'll face the consequences," he said softly. "But more importantly, people like her won't scare us again." The next morning, the neighborhood felt lighter. Calm. No more constant notices or late-night surveillance. But deep inside, Mark knew this wasn't over. People like Karen never accepted defeat easily, and sure enough, by afternoon, she was out on bail. Karen returned the next day, quieter, more careful, but still watching. Mark saw her car slow roll past his house twice that week. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, this time without her. Mark attended, revealing his footage and explaining what had happened. Gasps filled the room. Mr. Lang, the vice president, looked shaken. We had no idea." Within days, Karen was removed from her position. A restraining order was issued, but one night, as Mark was sitting by the window, he saw something that caught his attention: flowers left on his porch. No note. Just lilies. The next morning, Karen's house had a for sale sign. Lily ran up to him and said, "Daddy, can we paint the mailbox any color we want now?" Mark smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. Any color we want." But what neither of them knew was that the story of their HOA drama had just started spreading online. And people all across the country were cheering for the man who stood up to the neighborhood tyrant. Weeks later, Mark got a letter from the city council. It was an invitation to join a community safety board, created after his case inspired local reform. The HOA laws were changing. Homeowners now had more rights, more freedom, and more say. Mark chuckled as he looked at the letter. All he ever wanted was peace, but maybe peace sometimes had to be earned. That evening, he walked outside. The sunset painted golden light across the houses. His daughter played with her dog, laughter echoing through the same yard that once felt like a battlefield. Across the street, Karen's house stood empty, its windows dark. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Justice served." And just as he turned to go inside, a young couple moving in waved and said, "Hey neighbor." Mark smiled. "Welcome to the neighborhood. It's a good one now." And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.